Hi, everyone. We're so excited to have you here and joining us for this webinar on Money and the Love You Won and the One You Love with Cris Caruso. My name is Jackie Butler, and I'm the Bossed Up Digital Director here. And my job in particular is to work with the blog and the emails that you get on a weekly basis. So I'm tuning in from Yuma, Arizona, and if you don't know where that is, that's right on the corner of California, Mexico, and Arizona. So it's my small little hometown that I've grown to love. As we get started, just for some housekeeping, we take all of our questions and our comments through the chat bar of Zoom. So if you have any questions at all throughout this webinar, go ahead and throw them in the chat section, and we'll be sure to get back to you as soon as we can, or talk about your question during the webinar right during that live time. So go ahead and get started. Let us know where you're tuning in from in that chat section. We'd love to hear where you're coming from. Here at Bossed Up, we combine the belief that work, love, and money are all interrelated. So we really value this topic today of love and money. So Cris is the perfect one to talk to you about money today. She's been with us since the very start of Bossed Up Bootcamp, and we're so excited to feature her today. She's been working with Bump Financial Group for about 12 years, and she is also newly engaged, so she's the perfect one to talk to today about love and money. So we're so excited. Cris, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit more and share your screen when you're ready, we'd love to have you present. Thanks for joining us.
Sure. So I'm excited to see lots of DC folks. It is cold and dreary and rainy here today. It has been for the last couple of days. It is certainly not warm like it is where you are. I am super excited to be chatting with you guys today. I have been talking with my clients and bosses and lots of other folks about how to merge money and how to talk about money with their partners and the people that they love for a long, long time. And I'm now putting it into practice over the last couple of years as how I've shared money in my relationship has changed. So it's brought a little bit of a new perspective to me, to how I do it. And maybe I think it's just made what I do a little bit better. So I will, let's see. Can you guys see my screen? Is it letting you share that, Jackie?
Yeah, just go ahead, and down on the bottom it should be share screen.
Okay, let me see. Share screen. It says host is disabled, so I'm not allowed to share just yet.
We will go ahead and invite you here then. Looks like it's giving us a hard time here.
And you've got the slides. If you want to share them, that works too.
Okay. I think you should be able to have options now to do that.
Oh yeah, looks like I do. Let's see. Perfect. So when we think about sharing money, money just isn't about money. It's not really that easy. It is emotional. We come to money with the lessons that our families and our communities either did or didn't teach us about money. And so there's a lot of baggage. There's a lot of history that goes with how we approach money on a daily basis. And when you come to life with somebody else, you are bringing that, and they are bringing their experiences to you as well. So you've got your experiences with money, and you have your partner's experiences with money coming together to to share, to see what's happening, to bring all of those experiences together. And statistics show that at any point in time, of that divorce statistic that says like 50% of all couples will divorce over time, that 28% of them can boil that down to money conflicts. of the root of some of their problems. Either they're not communicating well about money, they have different goals about money. So, and a lot of that boils back down to how we have been exposed to and experienced money growing up as young adults, as more and more of are waiting and delaying marriage or delaying relationships, that where we would want to merge money with somebody, we often have years and years and years of financial autonomy, and people coming together in their 30s or 40s in relationships are, you've got a lot of autonomy and a lot of control that you need to figure out how to work around when you merge that with somebody else. So I like to talk about, oops, sorry, this is jumping, how people can merge money together and still maintain autonomy. So I am a big fan of this structure for managing cash flow or managing day-to-day money. Thinking about what goes into that bucket of shared household expenses. And when maybe you first are moving in with somebody, you share the rent and you share utilities and you share groceries. So really basic, really easy things to think about. I know that lots of couples do the like, oh, okay, I'll just write you a check at the end of the month, or we'll just square everything up, or I'll pay half and you pay half. PayPal and Venmo and all of those things make it super easy to, transfer money back and forth. You might consider getting to the point where you put your money in a savings account or a checking account together. Now, I warn people that when you're getting ready to the point where you want to open up a checking account with somebody else, there's a couple of caveats. One, there's nothing stopping that joint owner from at any point totally emptying that account. So you don't have a lot of protection if you open up a joint account and somebody else takes all of the money out of it. So I recommend that when you first get started, that you just put as much in there as you need to get started, to get the month through the month, to get those bills paid. But it starts to build that financial trust. It starts to build those financial patterns. And this is, of course, after you've already had the conversation with your partner about, I like to joke and say that, we always know what sort of the third date is. And I always say the third date's the credit score date. That's when you start talking about money, you start diving a little deeper about how are you paying for your dates. But are you really starting to talk to your partner or to somebody that you're going to get serious with about their spending habits, about their money history, about their credit scores, about their philosophies about debt, and how they live. Do they live within their lifestyle? Do they live outside of their means? Do they carry a lot of credit card debt? Just really starting to have those frank and honest conversations early, because money can be one of those things that you don't figure out until later on in the relationship. And then I find that a lot of women feel it's a little too late at that point to back out, but that they're not really happy with the money strategies that this other person is using. So I encourage those conversations early. I encourage them often. We're going to talk a little bit in a few minutes about how we have those conversations. But I'm going to start with just some strategies about what I call mine, yours, and theirs, or mine, ours, and theirs. And this is how I run my money in my household. So, we figure out what comes down into our joint household account. What are joint expenses that we want to cover? And that goes into that ours account. I am a firm believer that every person in a relationship should have money that they have autonomy for, that they don't have to be accountable to somebody else for. So keeping money that is, even if you're a couple that ends up being an all-in couple where you just get to the point, either you're young and you're starting out and you don't have a lot, so money goes further if you put it all in, or if you're just putting joint household expenses and over time you're adding more and more in. But no matter how your setup in your relationship is, everybody should have money that they don't have to be accountable to somebody else about. So you've got to reconcile that for yourself. but having a little bit of money every week or every month that is yours. Whether you like to buy car parts or shoes or, whatever that is, you don't have to have, any answer to somebody else. This structure works really well for a lot of my clients and for the people that I work with and the couples who are newly merging. It looks like a lot of accounts, but it really isn't. If you're managing everything at one financial institution that doesn't charge you any fees for your accounts, you're really managing your accounts and then co-managing your household accounts. So thinking about what comes in and out, that's the daily account, that's the checking account. Whatever goes in for the month goes in, it comes out. That second layer I talk about is a slush account, where you factor in the non-monthly expenses that you personally have and that you and your partner want to have. So thinking about, we are smack into November. It is November. We are quickly sliding into the holiday season. And that means travel, that means gifts, and these things aren't emergencies. So these are things that happen every year. We know every year that Christmas is coming. We know every year the date it's going to be on, and we know with general knowledge who we need to give gifts to every year. So feeling like you need to put, and that's a great conversation in those first couple of Christmases or first couple of holidays to have with somebody. How do you spend? How do you plan for the holiday? Who do you gift give to? How do you do it? And start getting a sense for that general money spending pattern. That can be slush, like knowing that I need to spend X amount of dollars for holiday travel and holiday gifts. I can plan for that throughout the year. And that's where that slush account really comes into play. Other things that come up throughout the year that aren't monthly budgeted expenses are like car repairs, or if you have kids, summer camp, or if you have pets, the vet bills, things like that aren't emergencies. And it makes cash flow feel a little bit better if you can average that up, add up those expenses, divide them out by 12, and make those contributions to the slush account on a monthly basis so that when you need that money, it's there. And then having a savings account after that. So creating that savings account for those mid and long-term goals. So thinking about maybe a house purchase or a job change, or even just your emergency fund. So having your own emergency fund that covers your own individual expenses for 3 to 6 months, but then also working towards that goal of building a household emergency fund so that if something were to happen to both of you, or if something were to happen, say if you rent and you needed to move really quickly, you would have a household pool of funds to tap into should something happen. And again, this is a great way to sort of build your financial connection in a relationship. So if you are just starting out with somebody, start with that checking account. As you get more serious and as you think you want to add more expenses to that joint pot, you can think about creating that slush fund. And then when you are, really solid or married or moving forward in a committed relationship, then adding that savings tier is important to have that and creating that savings goal. Some people in relationships, I find that in a lot of relationships that somebody's a saver and somebody is not often a saver. Somebody is a little bit more of a spender. And that is where what I call money dates come in. So we can talk about, how do you manage that once you've figured out, or how do you even get to the point of putting that money into the account? Is a money date. But I'll go back really quick and talk about, how do you set up that division? So you create the amount, so you know exactly what should be going into that checking account. How do you decide what goes into that account and who makes those contributions? And fair isn't always equal. So if we want to approach a relationship on equal footing, think about how your incomes come into your household. And this is for people who are just starting out together. This is for couples who have been together for years and years and years. think about how your money comes in. And if the two people in your relationship make about the same amount of money, then equal would be fair. And you guys would be making a fair and equal contribution to your household. But if you have a significant income difference in your household, or perhaps somebody has significant student loans and one of you doesn't, whatever that factor is for when you look at what needs to be paid and what's left over, if there's a significant difference, have conversations about how to do that. A lot of couples that I work with put their money in proportionally. So they put it in 75-25 or 60-40. However that best feels comfortable for both parties, because it's not fair for one party to be putting significantly more of their income towards day-to-day expenses, household expenses, when they earn less than the other person in their relationship. When you think about what then goes back into your own individual pot for that autonomy that you have, it ultimately means that you end up with less, that there's less left over for you for either discretionary spending or additional spending that you want to do, or even savings. If you're putting more of your income into the household expenses. So really having those conversations about what do you earn, what do you bring, and how is the most comfortable way for you and your relationship to contribute. So thinking that through, I help a lot of people navigate that. So the conversation isn't always easy, but it's important. I'm going to talk at the end about how you guys can get in touch with me. And this is a conversation that I often can be a neutral third party to help people have this conversation and help people figure out, how they make those contributions into that joint account.
So Cris, we've got a question. How in particular do you manage this division? What kind of tools can people use to track that?
So I recommend folks track, either use a spreadsheet or use a program like Mint. So in my household, we use Mint. I recommend a lot of my clients use Mint. And what I do with it is I have a Mint account for my own personal account. And then I have a separate Mint account for the household expenses. And both my partner and I can see that joint Mint account, so we can keep track of what comes in and what goes out. But the way that we get there is and that I recommend that people get there, is creating a spreadsheet or creating a list and writing it down, and saying, okay, what do we want to put into this joint account? Rent. Do we want to put utilities in there? How do we want to handle groceries? And one of the things that I like about having the conversation, which is the next topic, is money dates, is this is all flexible. And if it doesn't work, then you revisit it and you change it. And when you're ready to start adding more, you can add more money in and say, okay, I think we should add this in. I think we should start planning for this out of our joint account. And then you can slowly over time start adding as much or take away things that don't feel comfortable in that account. So I think that works, is answering the question. I can't see the chat. So Jackie, you're gonna
that's okay. We actually had another
question.
We just had another question come in from Katie, actually. And she asked if you ever see tension between couples, if they can see the balances in each other's personal accounts.
Sometimes there's definitely tension, especially if one partner in the relationship isn't feeling like, is feeling like they're strapped, or is feeling like the division isn't fair, between how they're contributing. And I think that part of that goes to that sort of full disclosure. And again, it depends on whether you're married or not. So there's a lot of legal, benefit to being federally married. A couple who is federally married, and so if we're thinking about retirement funds, and somebody has a lot more money saved in retirement than another person in a relationship and they're federally married, there's rules that, basically make that money, a joint pool, that if the relationship were to divide, that would be an asset that would be something that you could tap into at the relationship splitting. But if it's really that there's some animosity or frustration or stress around seeing each other's balances, or knowing that somebody has a lot more money then perhaps that boils down to there being some inequity and some perhaps hurt feelings or some stress or some tension around there not being divided fairly. So I would encourage folks to have that conversation. Do we have any other questions, Jackie, that we should take right now?
That's all the questions we have right now, but if we've got our participants that have more, we'll definitely let you know.
Okay, perfect. So then I'm going to jump forward and we're going to talk about money dates. Let me see if I can get this to go forward. There we go. So money dates, they don't sound as much fun as they really are, but money dates are a great way to sit down and have a regular conversation with your partner or your spouse about money. It should be not punitive. You should not dread having money dates with your partner. You should come to them with a feeling of openness, of being willing to talk about things, about willing to look at change, about willing to hear what your partner has to say about how they're feeling about money. Should be relaxed. And I like for money dates to include either tea or wine or something that makes you feel happy. And then it should follow up with some time together. So whether that's you have your money date and then you watch a movie, or you have your money date and then you have date night, it's a good way to start connecting and then continue connecting in a positive way with your partner. But in that weekly money date, this is your opportunity to talk about, there's some logistical things, but then there's also some emotional things. So this is your opportunity to talk about how the week went. What did we do this week? Where did we spend money? How do we feel about the money that we spent? How do we feel about, did something come up? Did somebody get a bonus? Is a life event happening? Is it tax time and now we have to sit down and file taxes together or separately? And what are we going to do with a refund if we get one? Is it holiday season and we have to start thinking about it? But it should take long. It should take about 30 minutes. And I really encourage people to carve out the time to have the dates. So in your money dates, basically the format is, and I have a worksheet that I can send to you and Emily, Jackie, and that you guys can send out as follow-up.
Okay, great.
But basically what you want to do is you want to either use your spreadsheet or Mint or pull up your bank statement and sort of look back at the week and say, how'd the week go? What did we do? Is there anything in the week that we want to look at with a cautious eye so that things don't become either get out of control or become a habit? I know that we all have habits or things that we do that we spend money on, either because it's convenient or because it's easy or because it's not mindful, that if we don't check in on a regular basis can sort of become a little out of control or out of what we are comfortable with the control. So I like that looking back a week because it can say, okay, what did we do? So for me, it's lunches out and coffee. And if I don't mindfully look back a week and say, okay, how did I do on my lunches out? How did I do with buying coffee out and not making it at home or making it in the office? It really easily becomes this sort of snowball where then it starts to happen every week, which isn't how I choose to spend my money. I prefer to bring my lunch so that I have my money to do other things with. And some weeks are just crazy, and some weekends are crazy, and I don't get to do the prep that I want to do on the weekends for food, so it means I buy lunch out. So if I can sit down and say, okay, I want to be mindful of this going forward next week, that's what I look for. I also look at what's coming up for the next week. So some of this is money management, is life management, it's calendar management, it's schedule management. What is happening in the week going forward? And even looking a little bit further than that. So do you have a birthday party? Do you have a baby shower to go to? Are you going to happy hour after work? And what does that mean financially? Does that mean I need to bring a gift? Does that mean I need to pay for brunch? Does that mean that I have a little traveling to do and so I need to pay for gas? And how does that structure my week? Again, how does that structure my week financially? One of the things I tell people a lot is you can do anything with your money, but you can't do everything. So we have to make choices about where we want to spend our money and what is important to us and what's in line with our values. So if we look at a week and we don't prepare for the week, both in terms of schedule, but financially, we can't do everything. Our money, the discretionary money that we've set aside for that particular week doesn't cover everything. It doesn't cover, the happy hour and the bridal shower that we have to go to on Saturday and all the other things during the week. So looking forward a week, it means, okay, I really need to bring my lunch this week because I'm going to have this extra expense on the weekend. And as you start to talk to your partner about what those things are, and it's really important if you have children too, because now we've got kids events and birthday parties and, swimming lessons and all of those things that we have to factor in for. So what do we need to prepare for the week? And how do we need to adjust our regular schedule to prepare for those extra things? And then looking forward, this is kind of fun because it becomes goal planning, it becomes event planning, it's life planning. What do we have coming up in the next month, or what do we have coming up in the next quarter? And this is a really relevant time to be doing for this. So we're getting ready to go away in, gosh, I can't believe it's 2 weeks, but we're getting ready to go in 2 weeks. We're going to spend Thanksgiving with my family. It means we're going to Florida. It means that we have extra pet sitter care that we need to plan for. We want to have some discretionary money set aside so that we can, take some fun side trips or day trips and do things. So that's something that we've been talking about for quite a few weeks now. How do we need to set aside extra money from, our savings goals to create a mini goal? So we've known since like August we were going to go on this trip. So we've had a mini goal of having this at the end of Thanksgiving. Or the end of November for Thanksgiving. We check in on those mini goals as we have our chats. I'm really visual, so I like to draw little pictures and color them in and just hang them like on the fridge or have them around for those short mini goals. Or what do you need to make adjustments for? So if they're long-term goals coming up, do you have a weekend away? Do you have a vacation? Do you have family coming? Are you hosting the holidays? And so therefore you need to adjust your grocery bill or grocery budget for the month of November and December, whatever that is. But again, keeping in mind that family puts a lot of pressure on us, and how we choose to, how we have to show up for them, or how we want to put on a holiday for them. And we just each of us need to bring that honesty and openness to the conversations about how we're going to prepare for these things, because we all, again, it goes back to, we all have different experiences and different exposures of what we want to do and how we want to be there. So money dates should take about 30 minutes. And if you do them every week, you get really good at it. And different things come up. They come up all the time. But it is the key to financial happiness with somebody else. Being able to have frank and honest conversations about money with your partner. And this is the best way that I found for my clients to do it. And they come to me and they'll say, we haven't been having our money dates and we feel like things are really out of control. And so I welcome them to come back to those money dates. I give them the checklist. I invite them to check in with me. If theirs are scheduled for, say, Sunday nights, I invite them to check in with me on Monday just to let me know that they had it. I don't really care about what they talked about or what they did, but I invite them to check in with me and tell me that they did it, to help them have that sort of accountability to somebody else that they spent the time. Initially, when you start having them, they can take a little longer because you are maybe setting up your joint accounts, or you're setting up, or you're having a conversation to say, okay, I'm ready to make this change. Let's add more to our accounts. But I think that I find that once you start having them, they don't take very long. But it's super, super important to do every week. Jackie, do we have any questions?
We don't have any questions quite yet, but if you've got any questions, feel free to throw those in the chat section. Let us know where you're at with your money dates. Are you having them currently? Do you want to make them start? What do you find is the most difficult step in this process for couples usually, Cris?
Getting started. So if you've been in a relationship for a really long time and you aren't having money dates, or you're feeling like you're not connecting to each other, around money, it can be a little daunting to get started, to change. It's like any new thing that you want to start. It can be a little daunting to change a conversation, especially if it isn't one that you've been having. So that can be challenging. I love to see couples when they are, getting together to, sort of see them slowly over time as the relationship builds, adding some of these pieces in, because it doesn't necessarily have to be, an all in. And I see really very, very few couples, wait until they're married or wait until they're in a, committed relationship to start even some of these steps. So I like to see, it's really rewarding to see people starting this and having really healthy money conversations as they build and grow their relationships. And then if people haven't done it and sort of are like, okay, we really need to do something, it is challenging to start, but it's definitely rewarding. And if we can be in control of the thing that causes a lot of stress in relationships, I think we definitely should.
That's some great information. Now we have a question from Joanna, and she wants to know when the most common time that you see is, or the best time that you see for having a money date.
Joanna, give us some more feedback, like time during the week or time as you're getting started in your relationship?
Yeah, she says, is it Sundays or during the week that you see most often?
I see a lot of clients do it on the weekends. But really whatever works for you. If you guys have, a one night a week where you already have a date, or if you have lunch together one day during the week, wherever you can just carve out some quiet time. And like I said, I like to follow up the money date with something, where we have some time together, where people have time together to go do something fun or to stay connected a little bit. That's why I think weekends work for a lot of people, but really wherever you can carve out that 30 minutes to have the conversation.
Perfect. So now Jessica asks, would you use these same steps if you're not living together and don't have joint finances? And are there baby steps that you'd recommend getting started?
Yeah. So you could probably eliminate the account setup piece, but absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of these things, you could even do if you're single. You could, when you're managing your own money. And when I was single, I did these things, and I do this for myself. So I do it, together. We do it for our household account, but then I do it for myself of okay, what happened this week? And what do I need to change? What do I want to do differently? What do I have coming up that I need to make plans for? But I think being really, really honest early in a relationship about your capacity to spend, your values, to just use language that says, that isn't a priority for me, or that isn't a way that I choose to spend my money, rather than saying, oh, I don't, or I can't, or I won't. But really knowing what's important to you and how you spend your money in line with those values is super important early on when you're dating somebody. Dating could be expensive, and it doesn't have to be. It's a great way to set that tone for, financial success in a relationship. But you can absolutely take baby steps of start talking about what are your philosophies about credit? What are people's philosophies about saving? Is the person you're dating, do they have any goals that they're saving money for? Just to start asking those questions and creating that open dialogue from the very beginning about money and how people, how this person that you're spending time with or your life with, what are their philosophies? Ask them questions about how their parents handled money. Ask them questions about how their parents talked about money. Those are some really good early money date questions to ask.
Great. So we got a question on Twitter now. So Emily recently did a podcast about financial abuse in controlling relationships. Can you talk more about why financial autonomy is important, especially for women?
Yeah, super important. And if we think back to that account structure that we talked about, I very firmly believe that every person in a relationship needs to have money that is theirs, that they do not have to be accountable to somebody else for, that they don't need to have to report back to, and that it's super important for women especially to have that get out of Dodge fund that basically says, I have enough money to take myself and to take the things and the people in my life that are important, whether that's children or pets or whatever that is, and to just get out of Dodge. And that's that emergency fund. And it is so important for women to have that money. Not a fan of keeping financial secrets, but I do believe that everybody should have money in their own name that somebody else can't take or can't touch. Because I talked at the very beginning, if you have a joint account with somebody, you've got to have that level of trust and understanding that someone else can be spending that money in a way that you're not aware of. And if there are abuse issues or control issues, you certainly, could have somebody who is taking that money or not using that money, in your best interest, but definitely setting money aside in your own name, maybe even you're in a different institution that is there for you to do what you need to do. Yeah.
And how should women handle it if their partner is uncomfortable with not knowing everything they're spending their money
on? That would be a red flag for me. If there was somebody that I was in a relationship with that didn't like the idea that I had my own money that I could spend on whatever I wanted, especially if it was after, all of the other bills were paid, it would definitely be a red flag, but it would be conversations about, because is that coming from a sense of control? Is it coming from a sense of maybe not from control or an abuse or a power situation, but is it that this person doesn't feel like they have enough? Maybe they come from a family background where there was never enough and they don't feel like they have enough. So I think some of it's a fine line of knowing, is this a behavior that is becoming abusive or is controlling, or is it a behavior, or is it an insecurity that's coming maybe from other experiences that they've had about not having enough money, not having enough resources, and that control might come from, that sense of control might make them feel better. So I think it's a fine line, and I think some conversations can lead you, and other behaviors and sort of the other things that happen in that relationship can lead you down that path. But I think that's a great question.
Great. So Sophia actually asks a question specifically about red flags. So she wants to know how you can spot red flags in a relationship where the money breakdown is unfair and one partner might be getting taken advantage of.
So I think, that goes back to that whole conversation of what's fair versus what's equal. And when I was looking for the images to use for these slides, when you actually do a Google search on, fair versus equal, there's this image that comes up all the time of these little kids that are trying to watch a ball game or some sort of sports activity. And one kid's really tall and one kid's super little. And in one image, the kids all have the same one singular block to stand on. Well, the kid that's really tall doesn't need that block, but the kid that's super short actually needs 2 blocks. And the kid that's sort of medium height needs 1 block. So that's what creates that equal. They can all equally see this thing over the fence that they're looking for, but it isn't necessarily fair because one doesn't have any and the other child has 2. We can do the same thing with money. Initially, if you're having, those conversations, being really honest with somebody, especially if you're in that dating, of saying, my cash flow doesn't allow for X. Can we do Y instead? If that person wants to then, treat and you're comfortable with that, that's a way initially early on to, have those conversations if there's an income disparity in your dating. if you start to move to a more serious relationship and you're merging money, the person who either has more money needs to accommodate the person who has less in terms of their budget when looking for housing. So if you can only afford, say, $1,200 for rent and you're happy to split that, then you would need to look for an apartment or housing in that price range. But if the person who makes more is willing to contribute more proportionally, then that opens up the range of places which you can look for housing. So if you think about what's proportional, so if I'm putting in, if somebody makes 60% of the income that they bring to the household and the other person brings 40% of the income to the household, it would only be fair that they contribute in that same proportion to household bills. And that's something you can evaluate as somebody gets promotions and raises. When we sit down and have money dates and when you do the initial setup of like how you're contributing and how you're putting money into those accounts, that can change as your jobs prospects change, as you get promotions and raises and bonuses, and you can always adjust how much you're putting in. But if somebody makes more, really consider making those household contributions proportionally, or even date proportionally, of saying, can we contribute this way, to try and make things fair.
Great. So Katie now asks, so going back to one of the first slides on fair versus equal, she says, what assets should you be considering when determining what fair versus equal is? And in particular, if somebody comes into a relationship with more savings, do you still split that equally, even though you're making the same?
Well, yeah, it depends. And it depends on where you are in your relationship. So if you've been together for a long time, or you're getting married and you're having those conversations about sharing money, you could do, and I'll talk about this again, or I'll talk about it after I answer this question, which I just thought about. If you're early in your relationship, if the reason that you have a lot more savings is because perhaps you have less debt, and if it's consumer debt, I kind of call all bets off on that. If someone's carrying a lot of credit card debt, that's it's a red flag, it's a caution flag, it's a yellow flag, to find out where that debt's come from. Is it from school? Is it perhaps medical bills? Or is it just somebody's an overspender and they don't have a handle on their expenses? If that's the case, and you have more savings than your partner because, then it's time to really dig in and figure out what habits, how do you change, how do you do that? If somebody has a lot of student loans, maybe they're just out of school or they've gone to grad school and they have a lot of student loans. I've seen a lot of couples who sort of factor that out and say, okay, after your student loans are paid, here's what you have left, and then they proportionally pay in. If you're just a really great saver and you make the same amount of money and you're a great saver and your partner's a spender, then you put that money in, and it's up to you as to when and if ever that savings becomes something that you contribute towards the household. So it really, really depends on the circumstances and how you want to approach it. So the other thing I want to bring up is, if you are considering marriage or you're considering a long-term partnership, I am a big fan of sitting down with an attorney and creating a living together arrangement, or creating a prenup or a postnup. A living together arrangement is a really great way to plan for how would you, or prenup or postnup, same thing. It's a really great way to plan how you want to unwind your relationship while you like each other. So if one of you owns the home that you're living in and your partner is living with you, what provisions might you make for them to be able to move out, under what timeline? Making that provision for what, would they get a pool of money? Would you help them with moving expenses? If there's a big disparity in terms of how much money you've saved for retirement or how much money you've saved once you get married, a lot of that becomes a marital asset and becomes a joint asset just by simply getting married. If you have a business, or if you have a lot of retirement money, or you own your home, I highly advise you to consider laying some of that out on paper ahead of time to say, this is mine going into the relationship. If our relationship ends, this is mine coming out of the relationship. and really think. And at any point, if you change your mind, you can have that null and void. But I definitely think it's something to think about in a lot of cases, or in some cases, of getting that living together arrangement or a prenup or a postnup.
Great. Now, Jessica asks, when it comes to things like student loan debt,
Yeah.
how do you deal with that in a relationship? Should it be in the individual budget or in the couple's budget?
Really depends on how the couple wants to handle it. So if you came to the relationship and you've been done school for a long time and they're, your loans, you can certainly, some couples keep them separate. That might be one of those things. It is actually one of those things that I see people over time slowly add to the household budget as the relationship has more longevity. It really, really depends. If you decide together as a couple, like, hey, I'm going to take a lower paying job, I'm going to go back to school, this is going to make our lives better. You do it as a couple, then maybe you approach paying those loans off when they come due as a couple. Now, technically, they will always stay in your name. They will never become a marital asset. So if your partner has, or you have a lot of student loans and you separate, they're always your responsibility. So unlike credit cards or shared assets that you can split, student loans will always be only in your name. But you can certainly, you can certainly approach them different ways in terms of how you pay them off. But I do see a lot of couples who make the decision together to say, okay, one of us is going to go back to school. They often take those payments on together.
Great. Those are all the questions we have right now, but if you have questions, okay, go ahead and throw those in the chat bar still.
Well, so I love this quote, and I don't know where it came from. I see it a lot in something, and money is a tool to design your best life. So there are as many ways to share money with your partner as there are couples and relationships. And just like we sort of all have things that we want in relationships and the way we have our relationship, there are ways to share money in our relationships. Encourage people to have open and honest conversations, to remember that money is emotional. We have baggage around money, all of us. We have our parents' experiences, we have our family and cultural experiences that bring us to the table about how we deal with money. If there's questions that you have, if anybody wants to, on the next slide, we're going to give you all of my information. I'm happy to sit down with any of you guys. I work with couples on a one-on-one basis to help them have these conversations, to help them get set up for success, to have money dates, to help them set goals, to be an accountability partner, to be a coach. And I'm happy to, I always love sitting down with people through Bossed Up to talk about money. So if you guys want to have this conversation very specifically to you, if you want to have it either in my office or online, I am happy to meet with you guys and to further these conversations on an individualized basis. So I will go to the next slide where you guys have my email address, my website. You can find me on Twitter, my telephone number. I'm happy to have individual one-on-one conversations with folks.
Great. We're so excited to have you here, Cris. We'll make sure that we send out your contact information in the chat section now and via email as well. So that'll be included in the follow-up email as well as a replay of this webinar today. And we invite all of our participants to join us in the Bossed Up Courage community. You can find the link right there in the middle slide, the tinyurl.com BU for Bossed Up and then community, and that'll take you right to our Facebook group. You'll also get an invitation to this via email after the webinar. And then finally, we actually talk about love and relationships and money at our Bossed Up Bootcamp, which Cris has been a featured trainer for in the past. So we invite you all to attend Bossed Up Bootcamp. We'll be in Miami December 9th and 10th. And that's actually the last chance for you to get in on bootcamp for the year. So don't hesitate, don't wait, get your application in now if that's something you're interested in doing. And we appreciate you all taking the time to join in with us for this webinar. And thank you, Cris, so much for joining us and presenting on this topic. we really hope that people got some good feedback out of it and hope they connect with you in the future.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, looks like there's no more questions, so we're all set. Thanks for joining, everybody. Have a great rest of your
Thanks,
day.
guys. Thank
Bye.
you.